A lot of people retire in Southern Oregon, but the real question is, would you actually last here once you experience the realities that no other realtor is going to tell you about? Because on the surface, this place looks like a retirement dream. Mountains, wineries, rivers, small towns, friendly people, and lots of sunshine. But beneath all that beauty are 8 realities that can make or break your experience here. And if you don't know about them before you move, you might regret it. But if you do know and you prepare, Southern Oregon can genuinely become the best chapter of your life. So let's get into it. And we're starting with the biggest shock retirees face their first year here, and that is the climate in Southern Oregon, often referred to as mild, but it's 4 distinct seasons, each with a personality all of its own, with a few surprises. And some would tell you that the wildfire smoke is a season in and of itself. And the reality is that most summers include some smoky air that can last for days or even a week or so. But the data from the DEQ shows that the air quality for Jackson and Josephine counties gets into the unhealthy for sensitive groups category pretty much every summer. And at that point, outdoor activity can become risky for some folks. So if you're considering retiring in Southern Oregon, you should expect to close windows during those times, or maybe run air purifiers and likely do some planning around the smoke. In fact, some locals actually treat those worst days of the year as smoke vacations and head to the coast or somewhere else for a few days to get away from the smoke. But here's the actual facts that you need to know, and you probably won't hear from anybody else, okay? Because even in the worst year in the last decade, Medford only saw 16 consecutive days of unhealthy air quality. And again, that is the worst that we saw in the last decade, okay? And look, 16 isn't fun, but it is a far cry from the months-long smoke stretches that happen in parts of California or Washington or Nevada. Summer heat also catches some people off guard. We regularly hit into the mid or even the high 90s and even sometimes break into the hundreds, but it is nowhere near what you would experience in places like Phoenix or Sacramento or Las Vegas. Our dry heat and cool evenings make a huge difference. And if you come from somewhere like the Southwest or even the Midwest, you'll likely find our summers shockingly comfortable. Winters, on the other hand, do bring some fog, and it can be thick, valley-holding fog that can last until early afternoon. And this is due to just the mountain valley geography in the area here. Then we have this inversion effect, and it's part of just the daily life from December till around February. But this year in particular has been kind of a bad fog year, but last year it was barely noticeable. So it's definitely one of these kind of case by case, year by year types of things. Winter mornings though typically start in the 30s, but when that inversion lifts, you'll see those days warm up into the low 50s pretty frequently. But keep in mind that those winter lows are significantly milder than you're going to see in places like Spokane, Washington, Boise, Idaho, Bend, Oregon, or pretty much the entire Midwest. And the trade-off though, snow-capped mountain views that are beautiful surrounding the valley, quiet mornings and cozy winter, season, perfect for those fireplaces, the books, and the wine tasting rooms. Spring, on the other hand, brings some pollen from the pear blossoms, the grass, the agricultural blooms, all that, and that can hit allergy sufferers fairly hard sometimes. But those same blooms make spring here one of the most beautiful in the entire West, with wildflowers exploding across the valley and the pear blossoms blooming and the surrounding foothills glowing bright green. It's absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous. But fall is absolutely stunning, arguably the best season in Southern Oregon, with loads of colors, cool evenings, warm days, and still plenty of things to do outdoors. So climate here isn't just about the weather, it's really about a rhythm. And if you adapt to it, you can get to enjoy one of the most dynamic, beautiful 4-season climates in the region. But your home and where you buy it plays a huge role in whether this climate becomes overwhelming or totally manageable. So let's talk about the realities of home ownership in Southern Oregon. But a quick side note before we do that, because if you'd like to learn more about retiring in Southern Oregon, I want you to scan the QR code on your screen right now and download our retirement guide. And that includes all sorts of great information about retiring right here. And also be sure to check out the rest of the videos on this channel. We have over 300 videos that cover everything from the best neighborhoods to the places to avoid, to driving tours, and so much more. Now back to homeownership, because affordable is a relative term, right? And Southern Oregon is cheaper than Southern California, Seattle, and the Bay Area, but locals will tell you it's not cheap, okay? Median home prices here are around $450,000, but pockets like Ashland or Jacksonville or East Medford can easily creep up over the $600,000 mark. But for retirees on a fixed income, The real cost often shows up after you moved in with things like property taxes and insurance and utilities and maintenance. And those can easily add up to another $1,000 a month. Insurance premiums specifically have been increasing here like they have most places on the West Coast. After Oregon's wildfire map update, many rural areas were reclassified as high risk, and that's led to higher premiums. Some zip codes saw even a 20 or 40% hike in their rates year over year, and some national insurers decided to pause writing new policies on certain rural pockets. And that has pushed some homeowners into what's called the Oregon Fair Plan, which is a higher cost, lower coverage, which is probably why a lot of folks have nicknamed it the Oregon Unfair Plan. But the moral of the story here is simply to just get an insurance quote before writing an offer, which is something that we help all of our clients do, right? And to compare insurers, because not all of them are the same and not all of them renew your policy after the first year. But here's the good news. Even with those rising costs, Oregon's insurance rates are still dramatically lower than most parts of the West Coast, especially places like Southern California. On average, the typical home in Medford might cost $1,200 or $1,500 a year to insure, whereas the same home in a high-risk zone of Southern California might cost $5,000 or $7,000 a year. So yeah, insurance matters here, but compared to the rest of the West Coast, we're still in very good shape. Older homes in the Valley can come with hidden maintenance, which seems to be the case pretty much anywhere with older homes, right? Many that were built before 1980 may have older roofs, may have single pane windows or aging systems or undersized heating and air system, right? And rural homes add even more layers to that, like sometimes gravel driveways that need more maintenance done to them, or wells or septics that have been neglected, or shared road agreements, things like that, right? So as an example, a simple septic repair can easily run between $500 and $1,000, depending obviously on what the issue is, whereas shared driveway maintenance costs can also be another few hundred or even $1,000 a year more. So these aren't typically deal breakers, but they are definitely things that you should be aware of, especially if you're thinking about getting into more of a rural type of a setting. But here's the biggest tip I can give you. Always ask for utility bills, for insurance history, and so that you can understand if the home is in any sort of like a hazard zone, like a flood zone or a high-risk fire zone that might require higher insurance costs. You see, Southern Oregon rewards the prepared homeowner, right? Not the surprised one. And that's even more true when it comes to healthcare access. So we're going to talk about that. Southern Oregon actually has excellent hospitals like the Asante Road Regional Medical Center, which has been ranked among the top hospital systems in the entire nation, right? And we also have Providence and Medford and Three Rivers, which is part of Asante, and Grants Pass. And there's another hospital in Ashland as well, part of Asante. So for a region of our size to have 4 hospitals, that's pretty impressive coverage. Primary care, surgery, and emergency medicine are all very strong here, but there are some specialists that can come with some longer wait times or even some travel. So for some of those more complex cases, folks may need to travel to Eugene or even to Portland, like I did when my son burnt his hand and had to go to the Children's Burn Center. That's just something the hospital here in Medford was not equipped to handle. It's not a common thing, but it can happen, and it's important, again, just to be aware of that possibility. And it doesn't mean that healthcare is weak here by any means. It just means that you need to know what you're getting yourself into if you retire here. So my advice is to work on lining up a primary care provider immediately after moving, because some clinics will stop accepting patients for months or so at a time. And if you live in a rural area, like maybe outside one of the smaller towns, for example, Rogue River or Jacksonville or Shady Cove or Eagle Point, right? Be ready for potentially longer ambulance response times too, right? The rural service areas can range from 15 to 25 minutes for response times compared to, under 10 minutes if you're within Medford, for example. So if that matters a lot to you, that emergency preparedness and response times, I'd really recommend staying within 10 to 15 minutes of Grants Pass or Medford, and looking into something like the life flight networks like Mercy Flights, right? It's only $85 a year and gives you a huge peace of mind. So here's a key takeaway. Retirees who thrive here are the ones who are proactive about their healthcare, not reactive. Once you have all those systems in place and you know who your doctors are and all those sorts of things, Southern Oregon becomes an incredibly safe and comfortable place to age. Taxes and the cost of living are the next reality check, right? So people hear no sales tax and they assume that Oregon's cheap, but that just doesn't tell the full story, right? Oregon does have income tax up to 9.9%. Social Security is exempt, but pensions, IRA withdrawals, and investment income are taxable. So check with your CPA on the specifics of that, because I am not one, but that is my understanding, right? Property taxes, on the other hand, vary. Jackson County is just over 1% typically. Josephine County is just under 1% typically, but It really depends on the specifics of which city you're in and if you're in the city limits or outside of the city limits and which county. For example, a $500,000 home in the Medford city limits, you might see property taxes around $5,000 or $6,000, whereas a $500,000 rural property outside in Josephine County, for example, you might see property taxes around $1,500 per year, right? So I would always suggest ask the question about property taxes when you're talking to your realtor, hopefully me, and I'd be more than happy to help you discover exactly what those property taxes will be depending on which city you're in and all those sorts of variables we discussed. Utilities are another thing that matter though too, okay? Because you have electricity, which can be $100 or $300 a month, depending on if your systems are all run off of electricity, like your heat, or if they're gas, right? A water or sewer can be another $100 a month or so. Internet, another $60 to $80 a month, depending on the service that you have. Garbage, $20, $40 a month, somewhere in there. And these are all things that don't look huge on paper, but they do matter and they're important to keep in mind. But to come back to insurance, that's really the kind of wild card here, right? Like I mentioned, premiums in high-risk wildfire zones have been going up. So that's just something to be, keep in mind, right? And to factor in is what does your premium look like in 3 years or 5 years, not just what does it look like this year, okay? Because here's the truth. You'll probably not hear from other realtors, but Oregon is not the cheapest state to move to, but compared to California or Seattle or the Bay Area, it still provides a tremendous amount of value. Most people though would not consider it to be low cost, right? Or a low cost market, but it is a healthy market, right? And it's one that's drawing in a lot of buyers from all around the country for a good reason. And that equates to a strong demand. And when you pair that with the fact that Southern Oregon has historically been underbuilt, what you get is a market where demand outweighs supply. And that sounds like a really good place to have your money invested, in my opinion. But what about when you want to get away from Southern Oregon, right? How's the airport and the travel to and from Southern Oregon? That's a great question. Mobility plays a big role in retirement, and typically bigger than it does for most folks who are just locals who are living here, because when you're retired, you typically want to travel, right? And Southern Oregon is beautiful, but it is spread out, okay? And so just kind of running errands around town or to and from appointments or to the airport, it can typically require covering some ground, and that can take a little longer than people expect, right? So if you were to go from Ashland to Medford, that takes about 20 minutes, or Medford to Grants Pass can be about 40 minutes, depending on which place you're exactly coming from and going to. From the Applegate Valley to Medford could be close to an hour, depending again on where you're coming from and going to, but that is all like a 2-lane, pretty windy rural road. Siskiyou Summit on the I-5 is the highest section in elevation on the I-5 in the entire West Coast, right? It gets snow, it gets ice, there's chain controls in the winter, and that's stuff that you just really need to be aware of, especially if you're one of those folks who's going to be traveling, to visit family in California. But if you rely on public transportation, you need to know that it is fairly limited, okay? Uber and Lyft, for example, do exist, but they drop off significantly when you get outside of the city centers. So if you think you'll scale back driving later in life, stay within 10 to 15 minutes of the essentials, or choose more of a senior-oriented community like Mountain Meadows or Twin Creeks that have a lot of these amenities and stuff built in the immediate neighborhood. But now back to the airport. The Medford Airport, often called the Rogue Valley International Airport, is small but incredibly convenient, okay? It has 10 or so nonstop destinations and basically no crowds. I mean, you can literally go from the parking lot to the gate in under 15 minutes, including checking a bag. Try doing that in San Francisco or LAX. It's not going to happen. It's important to know this though. Freedom here comes from choosing the right location. If mobility is something that matters to you, pick wisely and don't go too remote. Lifestyle rhythm is another part of Southern Oregon that retirees underestimate. And this is a small town region with a seasonal heartbeat, right? The daily pace is slower. People chat in line at the grocery store. Businesses tend to close early, and rush hour, if you can even call it that, lasts about 10 minutes, right? But the summer is where everything becomes alive, and it's truly, truly incredible. Ashland's Oregon Shakespeare Festival, for example, brings thousands of visitors, and Medford fills up with sports tournaments and concerts and wine events and restaurants, trails, downtown, those can all get crowded on weekends. So locals tend to learn to, run errands earlier, explore, on the weekdays if they can. But there's a lot of these different, events that go on here, and the event scene is fantastic, like the Brit Music Festival or Art Along the Road or farmers markets or wine concerts. I mean, you name it, there's something truly for everyone. What I've noticed is that the retirees who get involved in the community seem to be the ones who build friendships fastest, like volunteering or getting into clubs or golf league or something like that, or being involved in local events. Those seem to be the social engine of this region. But let's talk about winter, okay? It can be pretty quiet, pretty calm and restful. And locals call it the kind of firewood and wine season, right? It's peaceful and it's deeply relaxing if you appreciate that slower style of living. And that leads us right into the culture in the community, right? In Southern Oregon, it's friendly, but it is private, right? And your neighbors will wave at you and they'll help you with a down branch in the yard or something like that, or they'll lend you tools, but they generally won't pry into your life and ask about your politics, for example. Community is something that's earned here through showing up, through contributing, through being kind, right? And people value that, and they value their independence, not intrusion. And they care more about who you are as a person than who you voted for. And volunteerism is something here that runs deep, and it's how newcomers truly become locals. The outdoor culture here is another thing that tends to be a total social glue. So hiking, walking, fishing, hunting, kayaking, those types of groups that you could join, that seems to be where relationships really build the fastest. If you're a retiree that's into more of the nightlife scene though, this is not going to be a great hot spot for that type of stuff. I mean, if you want bars and clubs, probably not your place, but if you want a place to go get a good craft beer or a cocktail or a glass of wine, there's pretty much endless options for those types of things. So if you want real friendships, real conversations, and a supportive community, this is going to be one of the best regions in the West for that. The last thing that you need to be aware of before retiring to Southern Oregon is just the financial mindset that actually fits Southern Oregon, right? Because this is where retirees either thrive or struggle, okay? Southern Oregon rewards planners, not the kind of wing it and hope for the best thinkers, okay? Contractor costs, repair bills, in-home care can be higher due to limited supply. And when inflation happens, it can hit smaller markets faster and harder. So to play it safe, I would suggest planning for 3% or so cost of living increase annually. And of course, always suggest having, a good rainy day fund for those unexpected home repairs that come up. But the good news is that there are plenty of ways to downsize your maintenance, not your lifestyle. So for example, a smaller, newer, smart home creates more freedom than a big rural property with a long to-do list. But while you are planning your finances, it's important to understand how estate taxes work here. And my understanding is that in Oregon, the estate tax kicks in at around $1 million, which is far lower than the federal threshold. And many retirees get caught off guard by that. It's a complex thing, so I definitely suggest talking to your local CPA or an estate attorney about that, and they can save you a lot of headaches. But one thing I have noticed in helping hundreds of folks relocate and retire to Southern Oregon is that folks who thrive here seem to share 3 traits, okay? They plan ahead, they stay active, and they adapt. And the truth is, Southern Oregon is not a retirement fantasy. It is more of a lifestyle test. If you can handle the things that we talked about in this video today, the 8 things that we mentioned, I can tell you that with a very high degree of confidence that you will absolutely love it here. And if you're still trying to figure out whether Southern Oregon is the right fit for you, that's exactly where I come in. You can call, text, or email me anytime, and I would be more than happy to help you and to learn more about your situation and how I can help you to find the right retirement fit for the lifestyle that you want to live. I'm Brian Simmons with the Buying Southern Oregon team. I thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you'll check out some of the other videos here on this YouTube channel of what life is like living in Southern Oregon, like this one right here, which is one of my favorites. I hope you check it out. I'll see you on that next video. Bye now.